Why do we push through exhaustion? Why do we glorify struggle? Is grit always a good thing? We hear it all the time. Just push harder. Keep going. But what if grit, this thing that we often admire in others, is pushing us farther away from creativity and living lives that are meaningful? Today we are going to be breaking down the myth of grit, and I will argue how I believe that awe is a better suited replacement if we want to connect with ourselves and connect with others. Grit is over, awe is in, and hustle culture is directly competing with us achieving class consciousness. Let's get into it. Detox starts now. If you see the peanut butter stain on my sweater, no you didn't. Hello, you stunning woman on the go. Welcome back to Detox, your safe space to explore creativity, critical thinking, connection, and cringe. And today we are going to be focused on the creativity as we work our way through a discussion about grit. I have a lot of research that I'm very excited to go over with you. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. If you haven't been here before, hi, my name is David. We talk about mostly education things on this channel. So if you enjoy this, there are many other videos on educational theory here on this channel that you can watch at your leisure. So today we are going to break our conversation into 3 chapters. The first chapter, we're going to talk about grit. The second chapter, we are going to talk about awe. And the third chapter, we're going to talk about how we can take these ideas of grit and awe and harness them in order to improve our motivation. So let's begin with chapter 1, where we are going to get into this idea of grit. I started thinking about this idea of grit, and I wanted to think about where we see this idea most prominently, because we all have an understanding of grit, you know, this idea of keep going, push harder, don't quit, don't give up. But I wanted to figure out where these ideas come from. Where did we learn this? This idea of perseverance, in my opinion, is something that is far too pervasive in our context as human beings on this planet to be something that's passed around socially or colloquially. And then I thought about every movie I've ever seen ever. This hero archetype is plastered through many storylines for movies, TV shows, books, for children and adults alike. So I'd like to start by talking about the hero archetype. The hero archetype is a universal figure in mythology, storytelling, and psychology, often representing an individual who embarks on a journey, overcomes obstacles, and achieves greatness through perseverance, sacrifice, and resilience. This archetype is deeply embedded in Western culture and is often tied to the self-made success story, reinforcing ideas of individualism, grit, and personal triumph over adversity. This idea of hustle culture thrives on the idea that hard work, struggle, and relentless ambition are the keys to success. The hero archetype fuels this mindset in several ways. The first one is the myth of the self-made person. So the hero stories often glorify these individuals who rise from nothing, overcoming insurmountable odds through sheer willpower, and this reinforces the capitalist notion that anyone can succeed if they just grind harder, ignoring systemic inequalities and structural barriers. And it makes sense that the every person would really like to see people come from nothing. This self-made success story is incredibly inspiring because if you are looking to climb the capitalist ladder, seeing somebody who started from the bottom and now we here, it's very inspiring and people want to look up to that, so it makes sense. But the reality of people being able to climb that socioeconomic ladder is very low because of these systemic inequalities and structural barriers. The next one is sacrifice as a virtue. So in many hero narratives, suffering and self-sacrifice are seen as necessary steps towards greatness. And this parallels hustle culture's glorification of burnout, long work hours, and self-neglect as signs of dedication. I definitely experienced this as a teacher because it was idealized, the teachers that would stay in their classrooms until 9 p.m. every night preparing for their students. Yes, you're putting in all of this extra time and effort for the benefit of your students, and that is admirable if you want to do your job well, but This idea of persecuting yourself in order to uplift others, that always seemed a little bit odd to me, because at some point your cup is going to be empty and you won't be able to pour from an empty cup continuously or at all. So if you continue to sacrifice yourself and view it as virtuous, you're going to burn out. And that's where the hero complex leads, and that's where hustle culture leads, and that's where this over-reliance on this character trait of grit leads. The next thing is the moralization of productivity. If you heard that and your whole body just did a right now, yes, you know exactly what I mean. Heroes are often depicted as morally superior because of their hard work. Similarly, hustle culture equates busyness and productivity with virtue, and shaming those who don't hustle as lazy or unworthy. Most of us listening to this podcast right now can probably relate to this cult of productivity or wanting to always be productive. That's something that I absolutely struggle with myself. I have gone out grocery shopping, but I'm exporting a video on my iPad, so I think I'll just bring my iPad with me and it'll be exporting on the passenger seat as I drive to Costco, because every moment has to be filled with productivity. That is nonsense and garbage. I'm trying to say that out loud long enough that I remember it myself. The next one is over-reliance on individual effort. So the hero typically acts alone, reinforcing the idea that success is a personal achievement rather than a collective effort. In capitalism, this discourages systemic change, making workers believe their struggles are individual failures rather than symptoms of a larger economic exploitation. The next one is capitalism's guides and corporate motivators. So just as heroes have mentors like Yoda for Luke Skywalker, hustle culture presents business moguls, influencers, and CEOs as modern day mentors, urging us to work harder and push through adversity. Figures like Steve Jobs are framed as heroic because of their relentless work ethic, even when their success is largely built on exploiting labor and resources. I made this script myself, but I'm getting re-upset explaining all of this. In a capitalist framework, those who help us navigate the system, whether through motivation, financial advice, or productivity hacks, are often elevated as modern heroes. So these are people, like I mentioned, the entrepreneurs and CEOs who are positioned as visionaries even when their wealth comes at the expense of other people. Productivity gurus, you know these people you've seen on Instagram and TikTok who are teaching people how to optimize their lives, often ignoring the need for rest or structural change. You have influencers and hustle coaches, so people who are promoting side hustles and financial independence while benefiting from the very system they claim to challenge. Multi-level marketing is something that falls into this category very appropriately. I always think of that clip from that man. I don't know who he is or what the podcast is, but I'll put a clip in right now of what I'm talking about.
My day is 6 a.m. to noon, and I'm not crazy. You're crazy for thinking it takes 24 hours, just like some dude in a cave did 300 years ago. My second day starts at noon and goes till 6 p.m. That's day 2. And then the next day is 6 p.m. to midnight. What I've done now is I have changed and manipulated time. I now get 21 days a week. Stack that up over a month, I'm gonna kick your butt. Stack it up over a year, you're toast. Stack it up over 5 years, my entire life is different than it would have been otherwise.
I've lived a whole week before you've even had lunch. You're so pathetic. But these people exist, and for a lot of folks, they're looked up to because they fall under this hero archetype, and there's something to be emulated, and it's not good. Anyway, ultimately, the hero archetype, when filtered through a capitalist lens, upholds the illusion that success is purely about effort rather than privilege, access, or collective action. It shifts focus from changing oppressive structures to simply working harder within them. So one of the main people that we need to talk about when we're discussing this idea of grit is Angela Duckworth. So she wrote a book called The Power of Passion and Perseverance in 2016, and in that book she explored how grit was a combination of passion and sustained effort, and that matters more than talent in achieving success. She argues that long-term perseverance and dedication to goals are stronger predictors of success than innate intelligence or natural ability. So Duckworth, it's a hard name to say. So Duckworth wrote about 6 studies that she conducted tested where grit consistently outperformed traditional predictors of success like IQ, socioeconomic status, or raw talent, and Duckworth concluded that perseverance, passion, and resilience play a crucial role in long-term achievement over and beyond that explained by IQ. So you can see how my very quick synopsis here of this idea of grit from Angela Duckworth's book falls into this hero archetype that we've been building from the beginning of this episode. So what I did is I went to Reddit, and I want to read you two different comments from Reddit. One of them is negative, one of them is neutral, maybe even a little bit positive, but I think they illuminate the things that I would like to talk about. So the first review from Reddit comes from Apprehensive Home 913, and they say, the concept of grit is right up there with resilience for me, less of an actual worthwhile life skill to learn and more of a way to compliment people for handling being exploited with grace while not actually acknowledging the exploitation. That sentence stopped me in my tracks. I'm gonna say it again. Less of an actual worthwhile life skill to learn and more of a way to compliment people for handling being exploited with grace while not actually acknowledging the exploitation. It continues and it says, it's like that one exchange, you're so resilient. Thanks. It was either that or die. It's so interesting and painful to think about because the people in our lives who have accumulated the most resilience over time haven't gained that skill of resilience because they woke up one day and decided to work on that skill independently of all of their circumstances. They became resilient because they had to be resilient. And if you are not acknowledging the reasons and all of the things around them that forced them to be resilient, it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well, but you can see the connections between why you would want everybody to gain this sense of resilience and revere that as something that is of a very high moral standard, so then people can continue to be exploited upon without raising any concerns. The other comment comes from Other Expression 1088, and they say, from a systemic perspective, I feel like it depends on your role. As someone who teaches students almost exclusively at or around the poverty line, I acknowledge there are plenty of reasons outside of a student's control why they might be failing a class or struggling with school. But the decision in how they will handle and overcome their challenges is still in their hands. This is sometimes why I worry we might have gone too far the other way in pointing out systemic inequalities, especially to young people, because we are quickly losing teaching accountability. I absolutely want to spend my time uplifting others and not pointing out their failures, but I also feel like if we truly care about others' futures, we have to provide accountability from a place of love. And I think this book provides really great leverage for that kind of conversation. Ultimately, I am of the opinion that grit works when it is paired with autonomy and with purpose. And when it's forced, it leads to burnout. This is largely related to theories of motivation. And if you're interested in that, I do have a separate video essay all about motivational theory. So you can go check that out if you're interested in that. But for now, we're going to move on to another research paper that was conducted by Fong and Kim in 2019, and they found that excessive grit without self-care worsens mental health, and this traps students in cycles of failure. And that fits into what we've been talking about already. So what they did is they examined the effects of negative feedback on intrinsic motivation. So this is motivation that comes from inside, not from external forces. So they found that negative feedback, when you compare it to giving no or neutral feedback, does not decrease intrinsic motivation because it provides valuable information for goal attainment. But if you compare it to positive feedback, negative feedback consistently lowers internal motivation. So this fits in with self-determination theory because they emphasize that there are benefits to verbal praise. And there's a few different ways that they outlined in this paper that you can give feedback to other people. And a lot of this is framed around teachers in a classroom. And we tend to think of that as just for children, but it is adults as well. Us as adults, we have leaders throughout our daily lives as well, and we are leaders of other people who are not our students in our lives as well. So this idea of providing feedback is not something that is exclusive to teachers. It is everybody in every moment. You can be a leader in every moment you choose to be one. The first kind of feedback is instructional negative feedback. So this means that you are giving guidance for improvement, and this enhances internal motivation more than vague or purely critical feedback. This is completely a tangent, but I have to go on it right now. So I forget where I read it, so I can't cite this, but you've heard the feedback sandwich. If you are giving feedback, some people say that you say something positive. So your work is really great. Your writing was really neat. And then you go say something that's negative or constructive. And then you say, okay, but we need to work on your sentence structure because this really doesn't sound like something that somebody could actually read. And then you end it with something positive. So you go positive, negative, positive when you're doing that feedback. So you give your feedback sandwich. If you look at that idea in terms of classical conditioning, which means that you're associating one thing with another, like Pavlov's dog, that students, when they hear positive feedback, will have raises in cortisol levels because they know that if they hear positive feedback, they can anticipate negative feedback coming right after it. So it heightens awareness and stress hormones in the brain, so they're not actually able to take in the positive feedback or the negative feedback or the positive feedback at the end. It's just a mess. So this is why I think it's important to talk about the types of feedback. So we've talked about instructional negative feedback. So this is giving guidance with improvement, and it's not just critical. You're actually helping them get along with something. The next one is in-person feedback. So this is a lot more motivating when you give feedback face-to-face, and these foster a sense of care and support, which completely makes sense. The next is criterion-based feedback. So this is focusing on mastery, and this is more effective in preserving internal motivation than normative feedback. So this is comparing to other people. I say a lot of these things as if they make sense, but as I move around classrooms throughout my province, it is very stunning to me to find out that a lot of people don't have an understanding of this or think that it's okay to compare students to each other or to somehow rank them in terms of performance. It's not helpful at all. It's garbage. Stop doing that. Next is wise feedback. Wise feedback is the category that I fall into when I provide feedback to students. Now, this is high expectations with encouragement and autonomy supportive feedback with non-controlling language, and this further enhances internal motivation. So you can give lots of critical things, but you can give options. So if you're looking at a sentence that somebody has written down, you can outline all of the problems, but you give options for how they can fix them. It can go any number of ways. Or you can explain to them what their mistakes are going to imply to the reader and if they are okay with those implications being passed through their sentence. So instead of saying you need to fix this thing, you could say here's how this is going to come off to a third party, because that's essentially the role that I'm playing in that moment. So it's motivating them through a greater depth of understanding versus this is right and this is wrong, right? Because there's more than one way to do things. But again, a lot of people don't believe that. A lot of people believe there's one way to do things. And that is ego-driven behavior, and that gets nobody nowhere. So in conclusion, educators should prioritize instructional, in-person, and mastery-oriented feedback to foster student motivation. Professional development and feedback strategies can help teachers implement these best practices effectively. So that's the research by Fong and Kim, where they outlined all the different kinds of feedback. And I really think that this relates to this hero archetype, because we are inadvertently giving children, adults, everybody alike this feedback through shame, right? It's shame as manipulation. You're not working hard enough. You need more grit. You need more perseverance, even though our world is built in such a way that you are not going to be able to climb the socioeconomic ladder because of all of the structural inequities, and you're not supposed to complain about it. You just need to work harder, do better. No, that's garbage. It's not good motivation, and It's not good feedback and it does not enhance internal motivation. So that's why I wanted to talk about that there. And right before we finish this chapter, I think it's notable to talk about this idea of toxic positivity and the just keep going mentality. So while encouragement can be beneficial, as we've talked about, an unrelenting push to persevere fosters toxic positivity, neglecting burnout and self-compassion. Teachers and students need breaks and rest for sustainable success. I have never in my life been one of those people that complain when kids just get a medal for showing up these days, or like, there's no 7th place ribbons. Why are you proud of that? Because I'm not. I think everybody should be celebrated for what they do. But as I spend more time in classrooms, I realize how this idea of toxic positivity is being passed on to the students. But I don't think it starts with the teachers. I think it starts with the government and gets passed on to school boards and superintendents, and then to the principals, and then to the teachers, and then to the kids. It's not a problem with the teachers, it's a problem with the system. You can't blame teachers for being toxically positive, because if you're not toxically positive, you're toxically negative, and that probably would result in a stress leave. In there. Okay, so we're going to get into chapter 2 now. Now, this is talking about awe. I'm trying to figure out how to enunciate that correctly to have it come off right. Awe. Say it with me. Awe. Awe. So what is awe? Awe, I can't say it now without it sounding dumb. Awe is a profound emotion that arises from encountering something vast or extraordinary that evokes a sense of wonder. It expands our perspective and motivates us. Keltner and Haidt suggest that 2 appraisals are central and are present in all clear cases of awe. You must perceive something as being vast, and a need for accommodation, defined as an inability to assimilate an experience into current mental structures. So these are just things that fall outside of the ways that we conceptualize our world. So there are 5 additional appraisals that account for variation in the tone of awe experiences, and they are threat, beauty, exceptional ability, virtue, and the supernatural. So I thought that was really interesting. And I thought threat was a typo there when I was reading this paper, but it does make sense, because if something is perceived as being so vast, it would be a threat. It can produce a moment of awe. I think about me standing at the top of a little lookout over top of the Grand Canyon, and there was a threat there. If I fell, I would have been dead in the Grand Canyon. So there was a big amount of threat present for me there, but that threat did contribute to the beauty of it all. So that's this idea of awe. Then next up, we have the science of curiosity and engagement. So awe sparks curiosity and creativity by increasing engagement with the world around us. So we have another researcher by the name of Piff, amongst others, and they argue that experiences of awe predicted greater generosity in an economic game above and beyond other pro-social emotions like compassion. So in follow-up experiments, inductions of awe, which were relative to various control states, increased ethical decision-making, generosity, and pro-social values. And finally, a naturalistic induction of awe in which participants stood in a grove of towering trees, enhanced pro-social helping behavior, and decreased entitlement compared to participants in a control condition. That blew my mind. You're just standing, having this moment of awe, and you are more generous, you are more pro-social, you are more ethical. It does make sense. But to see it written down like this in a scientifically verifiable way was really cool. Then we have mediational data demonstrates that the effects of awe on prosociality are explained in part by feelings of being small. So it does make sense. If you view yourself as small and I'm going to say insignificant, that's not necessarily something that's bad. We are insignificant. We are one human listening to this right now. We are small in comparison to everything that's going on around us. And sometimes it can be comforting to feel small. It does soothe my anxiety when I feel small and insignificant, because then nobody has expectations of me. I'm just Just a small little guy. When experiencing awe, learners engage more deeply, they make new connections, and open themselves to novel experiences. And this is a really big part of this. Things that are new and novel. Our brains are built in such a way to be drawn to things that are new, novel, exciting, outside of the normal and regular. So it can be something really powerful to harness if you are trying to get somebody to learn something. So there is a big connection here as well between this idea of experiencing awe and being in a state of flow where people lose themselves in learning and in a task. And I do have a standalone video essay about flow state that you can go watch yourself if you're interested in that, but we'll quickly talk about what flow means in this context. So flow is the experience of complete absorption in the present moment and the experiential approach to positive psychology that it represents. Being in a state of flow and experiencing a sense of awe are very interconnected, and I argue that these can be accessed through the power of play and specifically absurdity as a survival tool. So humor and absurdity help cope with stress and uncertainty, fostering resilience, and when educators incorporate humor, it lightens complex issues, making them more approachable. And this is something that is very powerful to use with people. Humor is amazing. I love it. That sounds so basic, but it is. I love being funny. I love looking for the quirky, weird things to say. I love surprising people with that. It does take an incredible amount of social skills, people skills, emotional literacy, and that. But if you can develop that, it can be very useful for you. But it is very easy to put your foot in your mouth, and it does happen. And you have to do that a number of times before you're successful at it. But this really fits into this idea of experiencing awe and I guess experiencing flow as well, looking for things that are new or novel or different. This idea of small talk of, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm good. How are you? Have a great weekend. How did you see the weather? That is boring, and that does not produce feelings of awe. So our feelings of connectivity with ourselves and others and material is lowered through that boring back and forth. So shake it up. Do something weird. People will pay attention. They will. So humor and play offer relief from pressure, and it helps reconnect individuals with creativity and joy. Environments that allow laughter, exploration, and risk-taking enhance motivation. That was one of the biggest things as a teacher. When I hear kids laughing, or you're teaching something and there's a group of kids sitting at a table and they're all giggling or whatever, I can't stand I'm going to say it. I cannot stand the teachers who go over and say, "What's so funny? Stop talking. You're being disruptive." If they're just making noise and flicking their pencil or like annoying people, then I can be on board with like, okay, can you stop being distracting? It's enough now with that kind of tone. But if somebody's laughing, if a group of children are laughing, you're a monster if you don't think that sound is beautiful, even if it's interrupting you. But you know what? I say that and I realize that I do have a Christ-like capacity for patience. And even though I don't believe in that, I'm getting off track. Anyway, the long and short of it is that I walk over to a group of laughing kids and I say, "What's so funny? Please, I want to laugh too. Tell me what it is." And then they'll share it with you. And then maybe the whole class hears and it's something actually funny that you want to share. And then you have this moment of connecting with each other. And then you can all transition back to math or science or whatever you were talking about before. Don't shut down laughter, because that also shuts down learning. Okay, moving on. The last part of this chapter is breaking the cycle. So because all the things we've been talking about here have been systemic issues, education and activism often neglects people's personal needs, and a lack of autonomy and understanding stifles meaningful engagement and growth. Yeah, that doesn't really help us. That actually probably frustrated you just now, that last sentence that I read. And all of this is frustrating because we probably know all of this, but it is hard to achieve, especially in a system that is not built for this. But you can have small moments that seem pointless, but they can add up over time with any group of people that you are trying to help, trying to educate, trying to do anything with. They do add up. So don't Be discouraged. I tell myself as I'm so discouraged, but that's okay. Okay, our last chapter, we're going to take these ideas of awe and grit and we're going to link them to these ideas of motivation a little bit further and start to rethink motivation, maybe. Now, the science of motivation. So there are 3 things required for a human being to feel motivated, and they are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So according to self-determination theory, autonomy means having control over your choices. Competence means feeling capable and effective, and relatedness means connected to others. So in order for somebody to feel internally motivated, you need those 3 things: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Those 3 words have helped me in my teaching practice so much. So if you are a teacher or an educator in any form, remembering those 3 things has been very helpful for me, and it might be for you as well. So if you are trying to instill grit and perseverance without autonomy, that does lead to demotivation. So when schools emphasize grit but strip autonomy and joy, motivation collapses, which makes sense. But again, it does need to be said out loud. The justice complex. So when passion becomes a burden, a lot of people, educators and activists alike, push themselves excessively, believing their mission justifies personal sacrifice, leading to burnout. Hi, it's me, I'm burnt out. Brene Brown talks about how proving worth through overwork fosters shame. And we know that, but it does need to be said out loud, even if just for me. But if you're here, probably for you as well. Many people feel very guilty for resting, fearing that they aren't doing enough. And sustainable change requires balance, but burnout benefits no one. I'm going to say that again. Burnout benefits no one. So in order to reignite motivation, you can employ the power of awe, and awe fuels long-term motivation while grit provides perseverance. A balance of both can, like Angela Duckworth says, foster sustained engagement. So creating systems that support both perseverance and awe is key. Education needs to integrate both awe and perseverance in a sustainable, balanced way of which you can avoid burnout. So this is building a culture of self-compassion, encouraging students, teachers, educators, anybody to practice self-care, and this can lead to a healthier learning environment. And we need to reframe this idea of success. You are not successful when you have money. You are not successful when you've bought a house. You're not successful when you have a job. You are successful right now as a human being who is sitting here, listening, watching, doing whatever. You are successful right now. Great. Now that the pressure's off, chill out and follow the creativity, follow the awe, follow the wonder. Because if you push yourself so hard into burnout with this idea of perseverance because you're going to martyr yourself because you have such a high morality-based assessment of this idea of productivity, you're not going to be able to experience awe. You're not going to be able to be productive in a meaningful way. And that sucks. And that leads to negative mental health outcomes. I'm just riffing now. I'm not even looking at my notes. Yes, reframe success. Grit alone is not enough, and pushing through exhaustion without awe, play, and connection leads to breakdown. Stop glorifying struggle. Value curiosity, humor, and balance. The goal isn't working harder, but working sustainably, staying engaged, and finding joy. Instead of asking, how can we push through, ask, how do we make learning and activism feel worthwhile? Every time I sit down to record one of these podcasts, I just think, I don't think I'm going to have anything to say. I mean, I wrote my script, but I don't think I'm going to be able to ignite my passion for this right now because I'm very tired. But my God, it really does all fall together. And the more that I learn about these things, the more upset I get by them because I feel so small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things and putting it all together. But other people must think these things too. I did take my ADHD medication this morning, but this is just what comes out. Recently, one of my education professors said to me, wait, do I have my notes right here? I think I do. I need to look. What did he say? He said to me, education isn't a good field for people who want to feel good about themselves. The fuck is that? He's not wrong, which is the problem, which is why I remember that and why that's upsetting. But I want to be a part in changing that. So if you want to be a part of changing that too, subscribe to this channel, like, comment, I don't know, do something. That was a smooth call to action. Another one says, keep up the angst. That's something else he said to me. Don't worry, I've kept up my angst, but now I'm gonna go have a gorgeous weekend, and I hope you have a great day, night, weekend, whenever you're watching this. Thanks for getting to the end of this podcast. I really appreciate that you're here. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, do all the things, stick around, subscribe, or don't. It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. Hustle culture is garbage. You do not need to dip your face in cold ice water at 5 a.m. before you go to the gym and live 8 lives before I've lived one day. There is no self-made person. Everything is a community endeavor. Hyper-individualism only helps capitalistic structures that are trying to exploit us. And grit can be good. Perseverance and resilience is important, but it can easily be weaponized, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks again for being here. I am so done with this, and I will see you next month for another episode of D-Talk. And until then, goodbye.
My day is 6 a.m. to noon, and I'm not crazy. You're crazy for thinking it takes 24 hours, just like some dude in a cave did 300 years ago. My second day starts at noon and goes till 6 p.m. That's day 2. And then the next day is 6 p.m. to midnight. What I've done now is I have changed and manipulated time. I now get 21 days a week. Stack it up over a month, I'm going to kick your butt. Stack it up over a year, you're toast.